Is that something you've done in the past, foraging for the mushrooms or anything like that? Never.
The case of Australia's notorious mushroom murderer isn't over yet. Remember this?
I'm devastated. I love them. Just can't believe it.
I'm outside the house now where Erin Patterson was arrested yesterday.
A woman accused of murdering 3 of her in-laws using poisonous mushrooms in a Beef Wellington.
Guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder.
This is the one story I've been asked most about covering in my career. Erin Patterson, the Australian woman who killed her in-laws and another relative after serving them a lunch of beef Wellington laced with toxic death cap mushrooms. Now, our team has been following this from the very beginning of the trial all the way through to sentencing, along with millions of people across the world fascinated by all the details. Now, she sat with her eyes closed for most of the time that the judge was talking, only opening them when he delivered the sentence itself.
The total effective sentence is life imprisonment, and I fix a non-parole period of 33 years.
That means Erin Patterson will be in her 80s before she has a chance to leave prison. But is that all about to change? Because this week she's appealing her conviction. We've looked at what evidence could be back up for debate. Last year's trial took place in the small town of Morwell in regional Victoria. It's about 2 hours outside of Melbourne. I spend a lot of time in the area talking to the community and spending days on end sitting in court, listening to the evidence and Erin Patterson's testimony. There was so much interest in the case.
Our Sydney correspondent Katy Watson is outside the court in Morwell.
Katy, good to see you. This case is getting so much attention.
And as part of that coverage, I returned to the crime scene. The case centres around a lunch that took place here in July 2023. This is where Erin Patterson lived, and she'd invited her in-laws, Don and Gail Patterson, along with Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson and her husband Ian. The guests came along here together for a Saturday lunch of beef Wellington. But in that lunch, there were toxic death cap mushrooms. Within days, 3 of the 4 guests were dead. The 4th guest survived after spending weeks in hospital, and very quickly, Erin became the prime suspect.
I'm devastated. I love them. Just can't believe it.
In this appeal, we don't know exactly what Erin Patterson's barrister will say as to why her conviction should be overturned, but it's not hard to guess the direction which they'll argue. In November, her team put together a series of points that form the basis of her appeal application, but that was done within weeks of her being sentenced in September, so things may well have changed since then. But let's go through the main points we expect them to argue. First, the mushrooms. Erin Patterson was accused of killing her relatives with mushrooms that she foraged in woodland about half an hour's drive from where the trial was taking place. One of the foraging locations suggested to the court was in this very street. Death cap mushrooms had been spotted right here. Now, that sighting was then posted onto a citizen science website, and mobile records then found Erin's phone had been in this area. But Erin Patterson's team argues that the evidence didn't prove she'd used the citizen science website to locate where death caps were growing, nor that she had definitely foraged for mushrooms in those areas. Introducing that evidence was at best irrelevant and at worst prejudicial, the lawyers say. Allowing it to go before the jury, they argue, caused a miscarriage of justice. And then the Facebook evidence from several women who formed a Facebook group that Erin Patterson was also a member of. It gave some insight into her state of mind and her views on her family, including her estranged husband, Simon. They included calling her family a lost cause and questioning whether they had any capacity for self-reflection at all. She accused her husband of gaslighting her and called him a deadbeat. Her lawyers argue that these interactions were at the very least irrelevant and would have prejudiced the jury, and so also shouldn't have formed part of the trial. Throughout the nearly 3 months of court proceedings, the jury was presented with a lot of evidence.
This CCTV footage showed Erin Patterson disposing of a dehydrator, which she'd used to prepare the mushrooms. The jury saw pictures of Patterson rocking up at the hospital, but refusing medical treatment despite having also eaten the lunch. And the court was shown police at Patterson's home, as well as interviewing her in a police station where she lied again and again.
Obviously, we've got concerns in relation to the mushrooms and where they've come from. Is that something you've done in the past, foraging for the mushrooms or anything like that? Never.
But in this appeal, her team say that the judge made a mistake in not allowing as evidence some photos and video related to mushrooms found on a memory card at home. Her team say that they wanted to show the jury this evidence because it would have shown a long and innocent history of foraging for mushrooms and would have backed up her argument that the poisoning was a terrible mistake. And by not allowing this evidence in, that, say the lawyers, was a miscarriage of justice. As part of the trial, Erin Patterson herself gave evidence. She was in the witness box for 8 days and there were queues of people coming to watch her. Nanette Rogers led the prosecution and she cross-examined her. Erin Patterson's lawyers say it was unfair and oppressive. Now, during that time, we heard more about the relationship between Erin Patterson and her husband Simon and how it had broken down in the years before the fateful meal. In fact, he'd been asked to that lunch and a Beef Wellington had been prepared for him, but he felt uncomfortable turning up. In order to shield the jury from media coverage and the opinions of friends and family, when they were reaching the verdict, they weren't allowed to go home. So during the day, they would deliberate in court. In the evenings, they would go and stay in a local hotel. And in the hotel where the jurors were, it turned out that there were members of the prosecution team, a key witness, and some journalists. There's no suggestion that the jurors spoke to anybody, but it was an embarrassing gaffe. And Erin Patterson's lawyers argue that it fatally undermined the integrity of the verdict and there needs to be a retrial. But that's not all. In the same hearing, the prosecution is also appealing. If you remember, Erin Patterson was told she had to spend 33 years in prison before being considered for parole. But the Director of Public Prosecutions in Victoria says the sentence is manifestly inadequate, arguing she shouldn't be considered for parole. The triple murderer should never be freed. We won't know the outcome of this appeal immediately. These decisions can take months. So the story of Australia's notorious mushroom murderer continues.